If you've been following me, you know that I've been casting TFT for about 4 years now. But deep in my heart, I always believed that I could also compete at the highest level. Because once you start talking about what people should be doing in a strategy game, you start believing you can do it too. Well, I finally got my chance this set. I entered as a player and not a caster in the Noxus Cup, an official TFT esports competitive circuit event where if you top 4, you go to the regional finals. If you top 4 the regional finals, you go to the world championship. What I didn't realize was not just how much I would learn about TFT the game, but also about myself as a competitor. Lesson 1. Going off meta works. For this tournament, I didn't want to play the established meta of Ionia Vanquishers if possible. I knew going into it, there would be likely 3 to 4 people playing it per lobby. It was absolutely dominant in solo queue, and the entire conversation around the meta was who can hit Xayah 2 and Nilah 2 first. And while this strategy may work for other people, I don't enjoy TFT whatsoever when I feel like I have to enter a lottery instead of a strategy game. So I needed to find out what worked for me and my play style, but something that wasn't exactly the meta that everyone else was playing. Is this even possible? As it turns out, yes. So many people were focused on Xayah and Vanquishers that they weren't even paying attention to other really viable carries like Mordekaiser. Mordekaiser is actually an incredibly flexible and strong floor cost to play around. There's several enablers that make Mord shine, such as playing around Noxus, Slayers, Demacia, or even just having scope weapons with a good frontline. Playing around Mord was going to be one of my primary strategies going into the weekend, and boy did it pay off. Day 1 started off pretty crazy. I began the tournament with a Piltover game. And remember, this is nerfed Piltover. Most players that I talked to were going to stay away from it because loose streaking is particularly difficult in a reroll meta where people are playing intentionally weak boards in stage 2. You just randomly get griefed all the time. I also made sure not to get into a trap of picking a strong combat augment early because it may swing these pivotal early round losses. Thankfully, I cashed out and I was able to convert it to a first. Everything fell into place for weekend 1. Mordekaiser was basically uncontested while everyone was drowning in their contested Ionia and Vanquisher lines. Another composition that I wanted to play was Nico Invokers, and I was able to pull it off before it started catching on to the meta. Because of how fast I was hitting these uncontested units, I was able to even push my advantage and win lobbies that I didn't expect. By choosing Poro as my legend, I opened myself to picking all the ridiculously strong augments. Throughout the first weekend, I played Rogues, Gunners, Targon Flex, Demacia, Noxus, and even Azir, who was considered very weak. I did end up playing Vanquishers a couple of times across 12 games, only because I was fed the line, but I never forced it, and I only let it come to me naturally. By the 12th game, I already had qualified and was guaranteed to win the weekend in points. So I ended up trolling and celebrating most of the game with the worst build I've ever played this set, Double Trouble Cassiopeia Poppy. I missed completely on Nico, so I pivoted into the fastest 8th of the weekend, but it didn't really matter. My final score for weekend 1, 75 points, 3.0 average, 83% top 4 rate, and 25% win rate. I ended up regretting slightly that I didn't take the first weekend more seriously because Cottontail ended up tying me in points, but no matter. I finished an honorary first in my heart. So that's my weekend 1. I posted the most dominant score of the weekend and danced my heart out for advancing to the final weekend. But there was one problem. I promised to cast the finals weekend for Riot's official broadcast. Will they let me keep playing, or will I end up casting and have a bunch of questions of what if? 2. You can't get this level of tension and excitement in ranked. There's just a different level of tension and excitement that you can't replicate anywhere else but in a tournament. In solo queue, you might run into people who are streaming or trying to entertain their audience. They're limit testing different ideas and they're just experimenting as a whole. But in tournaments, everyone's incentive is aligned and they're trying their absolute hardest to squeeze out every placement and minimize all possible mistakes. You can't really get this experience anywhere else. I wanted to compete this finals weekend so badly. In other esports and competitive gaming titles, you rarely see commentators enter tournaments. Playing and casting are separate skills. And I've been casting TFT for nearly 4 years with over 13 years of esports commentating experience dating back to StarCraft 2. It's guaranteed money, my natural element, and I am extremely confident in my abilities as a caster. On the other hand, I'm not an experienced competitor. I only play in events every now and then, while mainly focusing on analysis, co-streaming, and casting TFT. Competing is also really hard. You oftentimes embarrass yourself with silly mistakes and blunders, and it doesn't pay well at all. So why put myself through all of this then? Well, It's mainly to prove a point that I could. The beauty of a game heavily soaked in variance like TFT is that it's both for the full-time all-in competitor as well as the average Joe with a job like me. I want to show that I can hang, and as a bonus, it'll make my commentary better since I'll have more authority to stand on besides my solo queue rank. Fortunately, while I did agree to cast the finals of Noxus Cup, Riot graciously allowed me to keep competing just to see how far I would go. Mortdog even offered to cast more games. Thankfully, they didn't let Mortdog overwork himself, and they hired someone else to cover for me. Well, I guess I better win then. Imagine asking for all these special permissions to compete and then flaming out dead last in the tournament. It was the point of no return. I'm committed. Preparing for day 3 is a different beast altogether. You're up against 32 players who got to skip the first weekend simply because they're too high ranked. It's like that scene in your favorite sports anime when the protagonist team watches the favorites enter the arena and have an incredible aura of pressure. It feels so much more difficult to win when you know the field is much stronger and will be punishing your mistakes much harder. I need to find edge somehow. These guys are grinding hundreds of games more than me. They live and breathe TFT over 10 hours a day minimum, grinding endlessly to maximize every possible out. But what even is my edge? I was searching deeply to find out what I could do to possibly compete against the likes of North American greats such as Setsuko, Milk, Robin Songs, and Dish Soap. I couldn't really come to a conclusion. The only thing I could think about was how often I would get criticized for being open to too many comps and augments. Milk once told me, "Frodan, you know what your problem is? You play TFT as if it's a good, balanced game." I was just as confused as you are when you first told me this, but after using my terminally online translator app, I realized he meant that I needed to focus my game plan and stop trying to consider every option and every possibility like I would if I'm commentating. I was determined to convert this weakness into a strength and prove to everyone that you can be open to many lines in a tournament. So I decided that I will take some of Milk's advice and close down a certain number of composition and paths while still exploring the way I want to play the game. 3. Analyzing data is OP. As I'm prepping for the finals weekend, I started seeing some talk within competitive circles about whether Twisted Fate is a strong legend. That got me curious, and I started diving into the stats. I think most players by now have recognized the value of using stats and incorporating into your gameplay to optimize a lot of your lines. For people who don't know, there are a bunch of third-party websites that scrap the back end of the game's data through API in order to get a bunch of information that spits out the average placements of augments, champions, traits, items, and more. But playing Spreadsheet Simulator isn't exactly what makes TFT and data interesting to me, unless you're Jonah Hill from Moneyball. It's more about when you can spot something quite weird and find a conclusion that gives you the edge. So after looking through all the data, I decided to commit to Twisted Fate one day before the tournament. Why is that? Normally, when you're looking at augments performing in a comp, you'll see its average represented in the data as its name. However, because Riot decided to hide legend data, most of the times you'll see something like legend augment with its tier, making it hard to tell if it was something like Buried Treasures by Ezreal or Portable Forge by Ornn. But I noticed something really interesting though. When you look at a comp such as Bilgewater Neela and sort by its best 2-1 augments, there was a silver legend augment that was outperforming nearly everything as the third best augment for the comp. When you critically think, what could this legend augment actually be? Nothing made sense except for Twisted Fate. This is because the comp wants 5 bows on Neela with RFC, and Giant Slayer, which is normally extremely impractical to plan for, except if you have Pandora's items. So you're telling me Twisted Fate's silver tier augment is the third best augment you could possibly get, and you're guaranteed it every single game at 2-1? Sign me up. This is just one of many examples of how you can splice data to find an advantage. And I admit, it's not for everyone. Most people just want to queue up a simple game of TFT and play their favorite champions and traits. But if you ever find yourself stuck and looking for a way to gain edge, the answer is in the numbers. So after doing a bunch of research, I decided to say thank you and goodbye to Poro and pick up Twisted Fate. I was committed and locked for the weekend. Lesson 4. Many top players are as lost as we are. Now that I have my game plan, I needed some great minds to flesh things out with. A common way to improve in TFT is to have a group of like-minded individuals that you can bounce ideas off of, trade each other's secrets, and even correct mistakes if you're willing to watch each other's gameplay. For the first weekend, I prepped with fellow creators Disguised Toast, Boxbox, Raditz, and Ramblin'. However, Toast and Ray end up getting eliminated on the first weekend, and Boxbox kind of tilted off the face of the planet at the state of the meta. So it was just really me and Ramblin' prepping the night before day 3. Ramblin' is a fantastic player, but I needed more than just one person to bounce ideas off of. In general, people are often watching the top TFT players and aspire to be like them. But as you continue to climb higher, you'll realize that copying someone exactly only leads you to do an inferior version of it. Unless you're literally Kakashi with the Sharingan and can copycat like a pro. For the rest of us mere mortals, there's an important concept that everyone should understand. Contrary to what esports pundits may lead you to believe, there is no such thing as the perfect TFT player. There are simply too many decisions and skill sets for anyone to individually master. As luck may have it, this set I joined a practice group with the very top players in North America, featuring Milk, Satsuko, Prestevant, Kiyun, and K3 Soju. And it was a privilege to be surrounded by such great minds, and I was extremely excited to prep with 4 of the top 10 players in North America and Soju. However, I quickly discovered they are just as lost as you and me when it comes to what legend they're going to pick, what comps they're going to play, and what their general game plan is for a tournament. They regularly ask each other for help, and as it turns out, I was actually helping them more often than they were helping me. For example, Milk was very likely to lock in Lee Sin for the tournament because of his amazing scores on Trade Sector and dedicate himself to rerolling. However, after discussing my POV and talking about why I think Twisted Fate is superior to Lee Sin as a reroll legend, Milk ended up switching to Twisted Fate and placing 3rd in the entire tournament with some of my ideas. So, in an ironic twist, telling one of the greatest North American players ever and convincing him to switch to Twisted Fate gave me the utmost confidence in my own skills, knowing that I had a good game plan. I didn't need them to tell me what to do, I was telling them. This opened my eyes to realize that while it's important to respect the top players, respect doesn't mean you need to be afraid of them. I was no longer scared about the weekend, and I had confidence to proceed forward. Lesson 5. Mental preparation is key. In past tournaments, I always struggled with getting very emotional over everything, the big and little things. Let's turn back the clock and talk about my other best performance in a TFT tournament. In set 7, I competed in a similar official tournament called the Dragon Cup, where I was in a great position to qualify for the finals weekend. And even though I made mistakes, I played solidly enough to be in a position where all I needed to do was not go 8th. The game started out perfectly with a full tempo streak, and I was 100 HP win streaking all the way until the beginning of stage 4. In my mind, if I was going highly aggressive and ended as low as 5th, that was okay. Except it was not okay. I lost control and composure, and my nerves caught up, so I panicked like crazy once I realized I was very weak. In the end, my greatest fears were realized. I went 8th, and I didn't qualify. The sheer level of embarrassment rocked me to my core, and I ended up crying on stream for a long time. My hopes of qualifying for day 3 slipped right between my fingers. So what did I do differently this time to mentally prep? Well, the first step was acknowledging that I didn't exactly know how to mentally prep. I thought I did because of my experience being in the industry and watching competitors go through it. But the reality was I needed to set myself on my own journey to figure out how to mentally prep. And another thing is, I think it's different for each person. So how mental prep works for one person might not work for me. After searching for a while, I came to one conclusion that helped it all make sense for me. If you consistently work out and lift heavy weights physically, you can handle immense stress on your body and overcome a lot of hurdles. Similarly, mental strength comes from muscles developed by doing exercises for the mind, body, and spirit. For my mind, each day, I pursued a different kind of challenge. I started learning chess for an hour or 2 a day and doing puzzles to improve. Similar to having a different workout routine, which can help your muscles reach a new level once you plateau, with chess, I'm working out my mind in a different way than the usual pursuit of TFT. I'm not very good at chess, by the way. I've been learning for about a month and a half, and I'm barely 1000 ELO, but that's not the point. Instead, I'm focusing on the routine and discipline. For my body, this one's the easiest fix since I used to be very physically active but stopped as I got older. So I began to relearn meditation, focus on mobility stretches, and picked my gym routine back up. For my spirit, I started to go through books on sports psychology for about 20 to 30 minutes a day. Books like The Inner Game of Tennis by Timothy Galloway and Atomic Habits by James Clear, as well as some other bonus material like Mental Toughness Advantage by Douglas Comstock, has all been extremely helpful. While doing all these things doesn't guarantee that I'll win in TFT, it does reassure me that I won't be thrown off mentally by the simplest of agitations. After all, the mind is like a pond of water. The more disturbance, the less clarity that you'll have. And the most interesting thing about this mental prep that I'm doing is now it's transformed into a lifestyle. It's now given me tools that I've sharpened to help me with everyday activities, lives, and scenarios. And I know that it's going to be something that pays huge dividends in the future. Lesson 6. Every mistake matters. So off we go. The finals weekend started off rocky. I went for a reroll game plan around bruisers featuring Cho'Gath 3 with a dominant mid game, having over 80 HP and win streaking. However, the lobby got insanely strong, and I did make a couple mistakes with my positioning and item choices. I end up spiraling into a 7th. The main way I could have improved my placement this game was to pick a different reroll line entirely, like multicasters. But that didn't rattle me. I knew multicast was really strong because I was talking about it with my practice groups the week before, and I ended up playing in the second game, earning a second place. And I was happy to get retribution for feeling like I should have played multicasters in the first game. Plus, it's a comp that not many people were playing in the tournament. My third game had me playing Bilgewater Freljord line featuring Neela and Sejuani, not focusing on Xayah at all. This comp was the origin of why I chose to lock in Twisted Fate, because Pandora's items guarantees that rapid fire Giant Slayer build that is nearly impossible to get otherwise. Early game was really rocky, but I almost made a crazy comeback with Last Stand where I even beat a 9 Noxus Belveth board with full upgrades. But unfortunately, I got rogued and died in 7th place. Another major setback. Game 4, I got to play one of my favorite builds again, Piltover. I managed to cash out successfully and bring it down to a 1v1 versus, you guessed it, another capped rogue board. I got so confused by things like the extra Tactician's Crown and couldn't figure out how to position my board to beat it. In hindsight, the answer was right in front of me the whole time. I needed to take the frontline turret with self-repair and bait the rogues to spend high burst on that Heimer turret once they dashed my back line. No worries, second is still great though, but not getting that first really stung. Game 5, my seeding put me in a group with my practice partner Ramblin'. Except that ended up being my undoing. I contested Ramblin' on Quinn's Slayer reroll with my Winds of War start, and it's a niche out that no one plays, but we both had talked about it and we both knew it was a strong. Unfortunately, only one of us hit. I got a 6th. Which meant I had to return back to where it all started and pick Poro as my legend once more. Poro is particularly strong as a legend when you need to play for first, because if you hit all the augments you need, you'll just win. And man, was that game wild. I hit Tome, got +2 Vanquisher, aimed for a strong cap of Sejuani 3, but alas, Ramblin' held my Sejuanis, and I couldn't hit, and I ended up in a 3rd place. This meant that my scores were exactly a 4.5 average, and I was left to tiebreakers. The first and most important tiebreaker is how many first places you got over the day, and I had none. This meant that I lost the only spot for a 27-point player to advance. Even the narrowest of marginal improvements in any game meant that I would advance to the final day. I simply made too many mistakes. But that's okay. To lose is to improve, and boy did I improve a lot. As a final bonus, one person didn't show up on the final day, so Asa, the person right ahead of me in 33rd place, tied at 27, got to play. Asa ended up getting to the top 8 final lobby and nearly qualified for regionals. And while I could tell myself it should have been me, I take comfort knowing that this is the company of players that I was competing with for tiebreakers in the first place. So yeah, that was my whole journey of competing in Noxus Cup. I took a lot of solace knowing that this has been the deepest run any TFT commentator has made in the official competitive circuit. So that's really nice. And I'm also really thankful for everyone who supported me along the way. They believed in me, they cheered me on, they watched me live, sent me a bunch of nice messages. It's definitely not my last time competing. I'm inspired to go even further next time. And I hope that this helps inspire you, the viewer, to also maybe even try competing in TFT as well. At one point, when I was first learning TFT, I was Heartstuck Diamond and couldn't even reach Masters despite jamming hundreds of games. Now, I'm going up against the literal best players in the world who average better than a 2.0 to win the whole thing. And I'm loving every second of it. So if you've ever fantasized or dreamed about competing in TFT, take it from me. Anybody can do it. Put in the time, keep your head on straight, learn as much as you can, and don't ever forget, rogues suck.